Hey everyone, Sassy Mouse here, and today we are going to be talking about the 4 stages of substance use. So a little disclaimer right up front. When I was researching this, I was having a very hard time finding non-biased sources that talk about this topic. Most of the resources about it were from rehabs, which was incredibly frustrating, and clearly rehabs are biased. So, although I think the information is still good information and is worth making a video about, I will point out that if you are a more skeptical person, you can take some of this with a grain of salt, although I do feel like it is also kind of common sense, and there's not a whole lot about it that is particularly controversial, I guess. With that being said, let's get started. So the 4 stages of substance use actually start with stage 0, which technically means there's 5 stages, but only 4 of them actually involve use. You may guess that stage 0 is abstinence. Abstinence from a substance is the choice or condition of not using that particular substance. This can be intentional or unintentional depending on the situation. There are so many substances out there that you literally wouldn't be able to go through every single one. So for many substances, people are unintentionally abstinent just because they simply cannot get their hands on them. That said, given the option, many people would also choose to be intentionally abstinent from these substances. There is unlikely to be anyone in the world who has been completely abstinent from all substances for their entire life. That is because substances can include things like alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, even sugar can be considered a substance if you look at it the right way. That being said, people who consider themselves to be abstinent will often be intentionally abstinent from most, if not all, recreational substances, with the exceptions often of nicotine, caffeine, and sugar. That said, these people have taken a hard stance saying, no, I will not use things that have even the potential of causing problems in my life. The majority of people are abstinent to many substances, but not to certain other ones. They may have a small list of substances that they are comfortable using, and a much bigger list because, like I said, there are so many substances out there, and every year the list gets bigger, that they are uncomfortable using. The majority of people over the age of 21 have tried alcohol, and of those people, many people are comfortable using it, even if it's just occasional use. A growing number of people are comfortable using cannabis, and of course, caffeine is one of, if not the most commonly used substance in the world. There are, of course, another group of people who are pretty much only abstinent by accident. They have very little desire to avoid using particular substances. These people do not intend to be abstinent from any particular substance, and instead are pretty much open to using whatever's available. The first stage of substance use is experimentation. Before you can use any substance on any amount of a regular basis, you will likely experiment with it at least somewhat. Experimentation is trying a substance without the intention to use it regularly or incorporate it into your life in any way, at least not at that point. This will often be the first few times that someone tries a substance where they're kind of feeling it out. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves a user of that particular substance, and it hasn't really become any regular part of their life in any way. During experimentation, people may try a substance and really like it and choose to move on to further stages, but honestly, the majority of people will try a substance in the experimentation phase and never use it again. Many of the most quote-unquote hard drugs that are out there, people will experiment with and choose to never use again. It is honestly a much smaller group of people who chooses to continue using these drugs because the effects can be so extreme that people either are very uncomfortable with how strong the effects are for them, or they recognize that they like the substance so much that they are unwilling to continue use because they know it could become a problem for them. During the experimentation phase is when you really have the most control over where your substance use goes from there. You haven't committed to using anything, and you can really explore what your relationship should be, or you want your relationship to be, with a particular substance before you develop any sort of pattern with it. Again, for the majority of people, for many substances, experimentation may be as far as it goes. But if you do choose to continue using a substance, you may move into stage 2. Stage 2 of substance use is regular use. Regular use does not mean daily use. I want to make that very clear. Someone can be a regular user of, say, LSD and only use it once or twice a year. But because they have made a regular habit of using it on an annual or biannual basis, they can be considered regular users of this substance, even though it doesn't really have a big impact on their day-to-day life. For many substances, however, people will choose to use them more frequently than that. People may use monthly or on the weekends or even daily during regular use, depending on what the substance is. However, it's important to note that during regular use, very few if any negative consequences are being experienced. The substance use hasn't become a problem and may never become a problem depending on the substance and the individual using it. With great care, you can keep many different substances at the regular use phase without moving into the further and further stages where more and more problems can develop. Many people will have a substance that they use on a regular basis, whether that's caffeine or alcohol or nicotine or cannabis or even harder drugs. However, for certain drugs, care is needed to make sure that it doesn't become a bigger problem once you have developed a habit of using it on a regular basis. The biggest thing to avoid moving on to a further stage is recognizing during the regular use stage whether you are using it to solve a problem. Typically, if people start using a non-medical drug to solve a problem, they develop a dependency on it to fix those problems in the future and may lose the ability to solve these problems on their own with inbuilt coping skills. If it is a physical or mental health issue that you're solving, it can be helpful to see a professional about these at this stage before you develop a bigger problem later on. The next stage after regular use is risky use. Risky use is when your use becomes so regular and so often that you begin to experience negative consequences as a result of that use. For some substances, these consequences may be relatively mild or may manifest much further down the line. However, for other substances, this may be more serious. You may be able to stop and start use at will, but may experience high-risk behaviors when you do choose to use. For example, someone who uses opiates infrequently but uses very high amounts of them is experiencing risky use because the risk of overdose has gone up for them. They are no longer content to use a lower dose with a lower risk of overdose. This can also include choosing to use drugs without testing them, or that you are just using at a higher and more regular rate that puts you at higher risk for overdose, adulteration, having health consequences because you're ignoring the way it's affecting your body, and of course, any problems that started developing during regular use may become much more significant at this point. If you find that your use has become much riskier and you're starting to experience negative consequences, this is a really important turning point for you in your using journey. It's very important to potentially seek out help at this stage before it becomes a much bigger problem. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to see an addiction counselor, although that may be the correct choice for you. It could instead be that you seek out a medical doctor's help if you're solving a medical problem such as pain, or a mental health professional if your problem is anxiety or depression or bipolar disorder that you're self-medicating. It may also not have to be professional help at all. Just seeking out social supports from your friends and family can be very important at this stage and can help you feel more connected to the people around you, which is shown to help reduce the amount of using that people do when they're having more risky use. That said, if you ignore those problems and continue to use, the next stage is dependence/addiction. Dependence and addiction are two different things, but they're two sides of the same coin. Dependence is when your body physically needs the substance in order to function normally. You will be dependent on a substance if you experience withdrawals if you stop using. Whether they be mild or more severe, these are a good tip-off that your body has become dependent on the drug. You may be dependent on a substance without necessarily being addicted to that particular substance. Addiction is the mental dependence on it. Addiction is when you mentally need to have a drug. You feel cravings to use it and you ignore any of the things that are going on in your life because you tell yourself, I can't live without this drug. Some people can be addicted without having a dependence. They may mentally need a drug and be unable to stop using, but not have any withdrawals. This is particularly true for drugs that have mild or minimal withdrawals to begin with. There may also be people who have dependence to a drug without an addiction. This is particularly true for higher risk medications, such as people who are taking opioids for pain relief, or who are using other psychiatric drugs that have the potential to cause withdrawals if you stop using them. If you are prescribed the particular medication, it's important to talk to your doctor before just quitting, because obviously you have an underlying condition that still needs to be treated. However, if you are noticing that you're having significant negative consequences from not using that particular drug, it might be helpful to talk to your doctor about options such as switching to a less intense form, having them help you reduce your dose overall, or even talk to them about a medication vacation, which is a period of time where you choose to not use that substance so that you can redevelop your own natural ability to handle some of these problems, and the drug will actually be more effective once you go back on it. If you do have both dependence and addiction, obviously that's going to be the biggest challenge of all. Your brain is telling you that you need the drug, and so is your body. In order to stop use at this point, you will likely need professional help. And that's okay. There's no shame in getting help at this point, even if it's just help with the withdrawals. However, longer-term help may be useful, and it may be helpful to see someone who is a professional in the field of addiction medicine. Whether that's seeing someone who can help you get on a replacement medication such as methadone or Suboxone if you're using opioids, on a medication like Vivitrol if you're using alcohol so that you don't get effects if you do drink, or even just someone who can help talk you through some of the different problems. Some people may choose to go to inpatient facilities at this point, some people may do only outpatient, and some people may honestly be successful doing it at home. However, before you decide to get off of a drug that you are dependent on, please go see a professional to talk about what the risks are, because certain drugs do have a high risk of death if you choose to just cold turkey them at home. The drugs that are most likely to cause this problem are alcohol and benzos. However, there may be a few other ones, and it's always helpful to talk to someone before you just decide to quit and go through withdrawals in a home situation. Regardless of what you do, be aware that there are risks to certain drug use and there are risks to getting off of certain drugs, and it can be very difficult. That being said, if you have reached the point of dependence or addiction, I personally don't believe that you have lost power or that you are powerless. You still have the ability to make decisions about your own health and well-being. You have the ability to say, I'm not comfortable with how much I'm using, and you have the ability to have a say in what you do about it. I am planning to make a video that identifies the criteria for identifying an addiction. Keep an eye out for that if you do believe that you're addicted, but if you really want to know, go see someone. They can help you figure it out by talking you through a series of questions to figure out how much of an impact it's having on your life. Your life is your own, and your substance use is going to be unique. Some drugs are going to be less likely to get to the addiction and dependence phase, and some drugs are going to be much more likely to get there and may get there a lot quicker, quickly skipping through some of the other stages. Always be careful and be aware of what you're using, how often, and how much, when, what are you using it for. All of that will help you determine what stage you're in and help prevent you from getting to a stage that you're not comfortable with. That said, if you like this content and you want to know when my addiction criteria video comes out, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do the thumb thingy and the dingle dingle of the bell, whatever. And as always, stay safer out there.